We are going to, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're going to have another episode of the Jain Irrigation Training Series. I'm your host, Richard Rastusha, and today we're going to be talking about something that is a little different. And what I mean by a little different is we're not going to talk strictly about irrigation today, but we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening with the weather. And I don't mean your local weather and is it sunny or cool today. What I'm talking about is the big dramatic differences that I think we're all experiencing. Certainly, I was thinking about this the other day, this term atmospheric river. Right. This is a term I just learned maybe in the last 4 or 5 years. Hasn't been in my vocabulary prior to that. I certainly know sitting here in California, I'm looking at 20 plus years of mega drought. And now people are saying, well, is it really a mega drought or is it aridification of the whole region? So lots of things, lots of new terminology are happening. And the reason this is happening, it's a result of things are changing with the weather, long-term changes. The other thing that I think we're all experiencing and noticing is that these changes mean dramatic shifts in weather, right? We see a really hot day or a hot span, then that's followed by a really colder span. So in particular, it's these changes and the dramatic changes that I think are so difficult when it comes to water management. And today we're going to talk about how you as a water manager can use some tools and some things you can do to manage these extremes a lot better. And taking us through this journey today is Greg Black. He is the operations manager for ET Water and Jain Irrigation, working particularly in the smart controller area. And Greg's been involved in smart controllers for nearly 20 years now. I think he was the 3rd employee at ET Water when they started. He has really seen the whole span of years of incredible acceleration of technology in water management that we've seen in landscape irrigation. And he's here to share some of that with you today. The other thing I want to say about Greg is if you've had the experience of being one of his customers, you can certainly know that Greg goes above and beyond to make sure your experience is a good one. And I know today he's going to try to do that as well for all the viewers. So Greg, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Richard, thank you so much. That's a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, look, Greg, I'm going to just jump right in this, right? And again, I don't know if I necessarily want to call this climate change, but certainly feels like to me that things are changing. There's some change afoot. I don't know if it's man-made necessarily or just a change in the weather that happens from time to time. But I do know one thing's for sure. We are seeing change. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, Richard, when I'm out talking with customers, what they're reporting back to me is this concept of intensity, right? So the weather is changing, it's more variable, it's hotter for longer, or there's more rain. It's that intensity of weather variability that's really starting to get people's attention.
Yeah. Mine too, right? I mean, that's what becomes so noticeable. And I one of the things I always think about is as a kid growing up in Arizona, we would travel to the snow quite often, right? So we're talking, 40 plus years ago, traveling up to snow country and really, seeing 15, 20 feet of snow on the side of the road, not being able to, turn left or right because you couldn't see, because there was so much snow. And I just think that has gone away for the state of Arizona, at least for the last 10 or 15 years. So, I always look to my personal examples of this, not to mention it's just a lot hotter in Southern California right now and Arizona where I grew up. It's different. So considering these differences, Greg, what do water managers need to know about this so they can properly manage irrigation?
Richard, there's a couple of things you got to know, right? The first thing you got to know is your irrigation infrastructure, right? So in these periods of heat and drought, got to make sure all that water going through all those pipes is getting on the plants and not being wasted or lost to leaks and breaks. Once you feel clear that your infrastructure has kind of full integrity or as close as you can get, the next thing you got to know is data. You got to know more about this weather. You got to know more about the variability. How long is it going to be hot? How much hotter is it going to be? If it does rain, how much rain do we anticipate? It's that kind of weather information, that kind of weather factor data that folks are going to need in order to make good decisions about irrigation management.
Yeah, so this just opens up a whole Pandora's box of questions for me. And before I get into them, I just want to remind everybody that I do have the Q&A and the chat open. So if you have a question for Greg or me and you want to ask it, please put them in there. Or if you have a comment, put it in the chat and I'll be sure to share what's appropriate. So, all right, so let's say I have all this access to data, Greg, but I don't have a smart controller. Am I really going to say, gee, San Diego is going to be hot this weekend? I know that for sure. So I'm going to, I'm managing 10 HOAs, a total of 50 controllers. Am I going to go out there and change irrigation today before the weekend comes?
You may have to, Richard. The thing about a standard timer or a system that only has kind of minimal weather information is that, yeah, more and more you're going to be on the hook for visiting these controllers, making sure that they can apply the right amount of water to the landscapes you and your customer believe are most critical for those sites. The thing about smart irrigation is you can be more hands-on with more data automatically, but standard timers still struggle to keep up with that.
Yeah, so if I am using a standard timer still, what's my typical day look like?
Well, Richard, a standard timer, as we all know, is only going to execute the program the user entered. Yeah. Right. So in your example, if San Diego is going to be hot or if it's going to be cooler up here in Fort Bragg, a resource is going to have to hop in a truck and go visit that controller and make a change to the schedule. And once or twice in the old days, right, that's what people would do. They'd set it for the summer, they'd set it for fall. That was great. But now with this intensity and the weather variability, if you got to send more guys or more people out in more trucks to touch these controllers, I don't think it's going to be necessarily a win, right? So you're all of a sudden starting to see some hits to your resource, right? And how much money it costs to keep folks in the field adjusting these timers.
Yeah, so with this in mind, we see a lot of landscape contractors, these maintenance companies hiring a lot more water managers to do this daily activity that they have to do, driving out to the controllers, or at least weekly activity.
So here's the thing, right? So you're a landscape maintenance contractor, you make a bid for an HOA, you win the bid, right? Maybe you didn't bid too much money, but you won it, right? When you get there, everything's pretty green, it's working okay with your standard timers. The key thing is your client, your customer has already budgeted into the future your cost of water, right? So when you go on site, everything is pretty much okay. Your customer thinks, okay, this is how much I have to spend, right? The feeling is that it's all great. We don't necessarily have to respond. Right. The thing about weather variability is you're going to have to respond. So whatever you bid to ensure that you're managing the irrigation correctly, it's going to cost you some more money. The thing about hotter weather, Richard, your controllers are going to be more active more of the time, right? So again, you're going to have to make some changes to those boxes.
Yeah, the other thing I think about, Greg, on this too, Brian Horn was our guest last week talking about technology, and he mentioned that he had a technology speaker at his technology conference that didn't know a lot about landscape, the business. And so he called 10 contractors to talk about the business so he could understand it better before he did his keynote. And he came back and he said, yeah, I perfectly understand the landscape business now and what their three biggest issues are. Labor, labor, labor. And it's true. And it's been this way for pre-pandemic. I mean, this has been a long time that labor has been the issue. So I really doubt that we're adding any people to change times on controllers.
It's true. And I think at some point, though, the cost of water, right? You're going to have to spend more money to put more water down as these periods of heat and drought accelerate and are more common. That's going to be a thing. And all of a sudden, if your customer's paying more money, you're going to get the call. It's like, why, what's the deal with the water bill? Why is it higher? And what's the trend, right? And if you're not in a position where you can say, oh, the reason is that we have these standard timers with old schedules in them, or schedules that don't update automatically, you're going to need to be able to pivot, we believe, to your customer and say, look, smart irrigation has access to solar radiation and humidity and wind speed, the key weather factors that really help the system decide how much to water and when. That's really where you're going to be able to pivot to offer better irrigation management to your customers.
Yeah, so there's two things that are really bugging me about this right now. One, so you can answer this in a dual role, right? But one is, how many smart controllers are there out there today, right? And what that percentage is, and then two, we were talking about battery operated equipment last week too, as far as part of technology.
Yeah.
And I was saying when I was at Valley Crest, people like Google and Apple, before we did their work, we had to invest in battery operated tools because that's what they were demanding.
Right.
So if that number of how many smart controllers is out there is low, how come we can't get, end user customers to say, this is what I want?
The key thing is, how does the site look, Richard? Does it look okay? Does it not look okay? If the contractor isn't increasing the invoicing to the customer to show how much extra time they're spending in the field to deal with weather variability, the customer is unaware, essentially, right? So what we have to do is help make them aware that there is technology out there that's not only going to help the contractor be so much more efficient and effective in the field, but it's going to have that benefit to that water cost, going to knock it down.
Yeah, so Greg, help us out. What's your estimate of how many commercial, now we're talking HOAs, commercial properties, the Class A buildings, shopping centers, of all these places, how many smart controllers, what percentage have smart controllers installed?
I'm going to go between 11 and 15%. It's not a big slice of the market, Richard. And the reason is that, again, if the contractor is able to establish the irrigation management, make sure this site is performing to the needs of the client, the customer, then we're all good, right? Particularly if the customer has already allocated the water costs going forward, right? So those inputs are kind of fixed. But what's going to start happening is the weather variability is going to start breaking that up a little bit. Contractors spending more time on site working with their controllers, customers spending more money for more water, right? And then it's going to drive the question, well, wait a minute, last year, 5 years ago, it was fine. Now suddenly it's not fine. What's going on? And is there a technology solution that can bail me out of this situation?
Yeah, so I'm really having a hard time wrapping my head around that number. It actually hurts my head, as you can imagine, because I think about this. I had a meeting with a water sustainability manager for a large city in California last week, and they flat out told me, their experience, smart controllers save 50% of the water on a property. So I've got a tool that can be installed in almost any property that's going to save 50% of the water, yet only 15% of the customers are utilizing it. So the big question is why? I still don't understand why, that's even possible.
The contractor gets to drive this question, right? There's kind of three things you can do, right? If your site is going to be impacted by this kind of weather variability, you got three choices, right? First choice is don't do anything. Everything's running fine. The money's allocated. The timers are working. My people are trained up to make their adjustments more frequently, but it works, right? The second thing you can do, Richard, is you can start making some small changes. It's like, oh, this turf over here it's not, facing the public. Maybe we can dial back the irrigation there or change what kind of landscape is growing. And then the other thing is, well, let's jump in with both feet. Let's make an investment in our assets. Let's make sure that the controllers that we're using on this site are actually fully capable of adjusting according to all this weather variability. If the contractor feels comfortable bringing that up, then that's when you can start driving the change. I mean, to your point, people do save money. They do save water. And it's an exciting thing, but the contractor needs to kind of nudge that conversation along. Because doing nothing, if everything is fine, I mean, it's an option, but it's, the window is closing pretty quickly now, based on what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think we're going to get priced out of the market for landscapes here pretty soon. We're certainly seeing it in Southern California. 200 water is now more expensive than electricity in Southern California. So here's the thing, though, that I just want to throw in here. A couple observations I have. One, it's easy to throw contractors under the bus and say, gee, they're using a resource that they don't pay for. So if they use too much and they don't have to pay for it, but the landscape looks green and nice, why change? Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I find a large number of contractors compete on price. And they always want to show value to their customers in the form of, I can save you money on this. You don't need to spend $3,000 on a smart controller. I can manage that water for you and you don't have to spend on it, right? And by the way, I'm going to be the lowest bid. So this creates a challenge as well. But the other thing that I think is really important about this is that, the contractors are responding to customers. When I was at Valley Crest, there were times where I put 100-page proposals together for customers on how we were going to save them water and what we were going to do and how we were going to do it and how we were going to use technology to do it. And that would get summarized down to one Excel spreadsheet that had my name on it and a number and my competitors' names on it and a number. Right. And then this is how the bid opening would go. ABC Landscaping's the cheapest. Are they any good? And they'd look at the property manager and the property manager would go, well, they're okay. And they go, okay, they win the bid. And there's my 100-page proposal out the window. So this has to be more customer driven too, I think. I mean, I just don't understand why customers aren't demanding this, especially when we've got people saying you'll save 50% on your water bill.
It's a bit of a conundrum, Richard. It really is. I think that our industry, the resources in our industry, I think we can kind of ring the bell a little louder about what the alternatives are, right? If you're a water manager, you manage a big portfolio, even a smaller portfolio. What is your daily focus, right? Your daily focus is making sure that you're applying water in whatever way that you do as effectively and efficiently as possible. You're managing the contractors on site. You're dealing with hardware issues, whatever, right? All this stuff is happening. What's not happening is nobody's ringing that little bell. It's like, hey, you want to save 20%? Hey, you want to save 30%? Hey, what if somebody comes on site and helps you with a free water analysis, right? What do we need to do to explain or show the customer that there's this opportunity here, to really generate some additional value at all your sites? Right?
Yeah.
We get excited about.
So you just used a term that I hadn't thought about in a while, but a water analysis. What is that, Greg?
Okay, a water analysis helps the customer understand how much water is needed for the plants and how much water is currently being applied by the controller. It's measured in inches, and it's a very straightforward calculation. It's something that we have used since the beginning to really help customers understand what they need to do and what they should be doing. It's a powerful tool.
So I totally don't get this. If your controller isn't on my property, somehow you can tell me how much water I should have used without having a controller there?
Richard, it's the magic of technology. Yes, certainly. Because we all know that there's, for example, climate areas, right? Specific climate areas in California. I think there's 27 of them. And in each of those climate areas, right, the weather is going to be different. The weather helps us understand how fast the water is depleting from the landscape, right? Once you know that number, and it can be distilled down to a number, like, for example, in the summer, up to 0.45 inches of water per day leaving the landscape. Once you know precisely how much water is leaving the landscape, then you know exactly how much water you have to apply. You can do that mathematics, figure out what your local water agency is charging, and presto, you know exactly how much money you should be applying on your property to keep it green.
Yeah, so that's a lot of science, a lot of technology. My guess is this report's got to cost me a fortune.
A huge fortune. You know, we need some blood, we need some kidneys. No. Richard, we're going to support customers or folks that are interested in a water analysis. We'll do it for free. Give us a site. Let us check it out and let us give you the report so that you can understand what we do and why it makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a generous offer, Greg. So I want to be sure that we're clear on this. If I have an HOA or I have an office park that I'm managing, or I'm the property manager for, I can contact you and you'll do a water analysis, meaning you'll tell me the past year or a couple of years how much water I should have used on my landscape. And I can compare that actually to my water bills, and because I know how much I used, and there will be a differential.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we do. It's something to help us, right? As a manufacturer, it helps us begin to show what that delta is, right? We know how much water should be applied because we know the weather factors that are relevant to that.
Yeah.
But the customers over here are just paying the water bill, just paying the water bill, right? That perspective about how much water is necessary is lost on them. Here's a fun fact, Richard. Did you know the appropriate way to water your plants in hot weather is not to increase runtime rates? The appropriate way is to change the frequency of irrigation. And the reason why we know that is that plants don't change, right? You have a plant in your landscape, root depth, soil type, sun exposure, all that stuff's not going to change. What we do is we help calculate what's appropriate for the plant, and then we figure out how frequently we need to apply that water. If I was a plant scientist, and I'm not, but if I was, plant scientist would agree. You water based on interval, not additional runtime. So that's another thing we can do to help out.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Greg, because certainly when I think about it, it makes sense. But in the past, maybe I've thought, gee, if it's hot today, I need to pour a ton of water on. But really, I'm just pushing that water past the root zone. It's maybe that I need to water today and tomorrow and the next day because it dries up so fast, not a whole bunch in one day.
Indeed.
And so, but there's so much of this concept of, oh, you got to water deeply. And I'm wondering how many people are just pushing water past the root zone. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't some smart controllers just adjust on temperature and they run longer or shorter based on?
Yeah, because folks understood, right? It's better to have a timer or a controller with some, understanding of what the weather is. The least expensive and easiest equipment you can attach to your controller is a temperature sensor, right? And then from there, you can figure out, well, if it's 10% hotter, I'll do 10% more minutes. So that's how we kind of get stuck as an industry in this notion of, oh, it's going to be 110 degrees tomorrow, so I'm going to water 18% more. It just, there's some logic there. But if you're a plant, you're not going to be very happy getting 18% more water. You don't need it. What you need to do is let the water in the root zone deplete to about half the level, and then boom, refill, deplete and refill. That's the way to properly manage your landscape. It's a big, gigantic asset out there, Richard. If you're watering correctly, it's going to be more pesticides and herbicides. It's going to, be a stress. No reason to do that.
Yeah, I think I totally get it now, right? So I've got a cup here, right? It's my 12-ounce coffee cup.
Nice.
It's a hot day today, so I'm going to pour 24 ounces into my cup. It's going to be wasted, right? But if I drink that cup and just refill it more often because I'm thirsty because it's hot, this makes the difference. Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing that we do here, right? We understand how much water the plants need. We understand how much specifically is depleting from the landscape because of all these weather factors. And that's how we can dial in precisely how much water to apply and when. And we've got reports, we've got reporting, we've got all kinds of things to show how that's happening and how efficient it is. That's one of the tools that we use after we do the water analysis at a site. We've prepped some report examples. It's like, hey, you can look and see exactly what's going on. We know the I would say it's fair to say, Richard, we know the moisture content of the landscape without having a soil moisture in the ground.
Yeah, that's amazing. So in times now where it's going to stay hotter longer, more days in a row, how does this technology help me?
Well, what it's going to do is it's really going to focus on not overwatering. Again, I go back to that infrastructure integrity thing. Got to make sure there's no leaks or breaks, right? Once you can confirm that, then this technology is really only going to apply what's necessary as we get in and out of those hot spells, cool spells. If the rain comes, right, you need to make sure that you're capturing all that rain information. It's that data that allows the device to adjust in real time. And we all know real-time information, real-time adjustment is a lot cooler than using historical information or past information.
Right. So, yeah, that's got to be the real key, right? Because if I'm using historical, but it's changed, that's not really helping me as much.
Right. Very true. You know, our sense of history and our sense of historical weather was one thing in the past, right? When those folks were putting together those data sets to load into some of these controllers, nobody was like, oh, what if we have some weather variability? You know, it doesn't work that way, right? They're going off an average. Now we can get weather variability in each month or in each week, right? If your controller is not understanding that and not adjusting your cycle of irrigation, you know, you're going to be paying too much. I mean, at the end of the day, your standard timers or timers with a temperature adjust, they're just going to say, "Yeah, Richard, I need more water today. Oh, I need more water today."
Yeah. So, Greg, the other thing I'm seeing is temperatures and weather changing on a dime. And here in San Diego, I'm closer to the coast than I am the mountains.
Sure.
The mountains are getting rain. I hear about rain last week, almost every day on the east side of San Diego, but nothing on the west. How do I manage that?
You need to make sure that the weather data that's used to change the schedule is available as soon as the controller wants to water, right? So what we'll do is we will make a connection and download weather adjusted irrigation schedules an hour before irrigation, right? 2 hours before irrigation, something like that. So we can get the best and latest information out executed into the field. When you have access to the weather data that we have, Richard, you know where the rain is and how much it's going to be and how long until it gets to your site, right? You can set up the system to shut off days before or days after based on how much rain you're predicted to receive. So that kind of predictive analytics, future casting, there's a lot of words to describe what that function is. But the ability to look ahead now, make changes now based on what's happening in 7 days or 3 days, it's a powerful tool. And again, it gives the water manager another opportunity to go to the customer and say, look, we're not guessing anymore. We know what's going to happen and we're adjusting today.
Yeah, so this predictive analytics, right? I mean, I think ET, evapotranspiration, only deals with what happened yesterday or in the past.
Right.
From whenever I do my calculation, it's behind me. So it makes a lot of sense that I have to look forward to, and not just to what the rainfall amounts may be, but actual ET. So with technology today, I got to believe there's a ton of companies that do this forward-looking predictive analytics.
Well, Richard, you'd be surprised. There's not that many. The reason is that you got to make sure the data that you're gathering is accurate as possible, right? You got to make sure you can check that data before you let the customer controllers use it. And then you got to make sure you're using the data that matters, right? The data that matters is solar radiation, wind speed, humidity, right? Rainfall. Those are the big four. There's, I think, 12 or 13 other weather factors that we gather to help adjust up or down what the irrigation schedule should be. But the ability of a cloud-based system, right, to take in all of that weather data, create the irrigation schedules, and then drop them down into the controller. There's hardly anybody really that has that technology because it takes some time and some money to develop it.
Right, right. And I think also, right, doesn't ET Water have the patent on the predictive analytics portion of this?
Well, now that you mentioned it, Richard, right, there's a little bit of some attorney stuff happening, should somebody want to go down that same road. But the fact of the matter is, that's what the cloud exists for. That's why people have service-based systems, right? You let the cloud gather and manage the data, put it in a way that makes sense for you, the contractor, and the customer, right? Execute those schedules, check on the reports, and then, you're good to go. It sure beats the heck out of the traditional model of irrigation management, right? Which was standard timer in the field, somebody in a truck running around making adjustments and, kind of spot checking everything. We've gone way beyond that. We know how much water plants need, and we know how fast the landscape's depleting. Put those two things together, I can give you a pretty precise estimate how much water you're going to need.
Yeah, so kind of to summarize it, the bigger the changes we have in the weather, amplifications as well as changes, the greater the need for a smart controller that deals with weather in real time.
Yeah, I mean, as your customer has to spend dollars for the water, right? And dollars to replace landscape or make any changes to the landscape, right? So at the end of the day, what's going to happen is more and more variability, right? Means more and more spend.
Right.
And your customer is going to get right back to you and say, look, I'm not really interested in doing this, mostly because I budgeted this amount of money going forward 2 years or 3 years. This is all I have to spend. Contractor, what can you do to help me, right? And that's where the contractor has to be nimble enough to say, look, well, actually, there's technology that's available that can gather the information we need and adjust the irrigation in real time so that we can make sure that we're as efficient and effective as possible. And we'll try to save you some dollars along the way.
So Greg, if I'm sitting on the fence right now and I'm one of the 85% that doesn't have a smart controller, what do you have to say to them now if they're on the fence and they're thinking about doing it?
I would say after you buy some sunscreen, right? Understand what it's going to feel like when all of a sudden your hot spell that used to be 3 days at 92 degrees is now 12 days at 104. Yeah. Right? Just wait. You feel free to wait, whatever you'd like to do. But the weather is going to make the decision for you. The variability is going to concern your customer enough that they're going to come back to you and say, look, what are we doing? Right? It's always in our best interest, in my humble opinion, to be able to reach out to somebody with a solution before you need the solution yesterday. And I think that's motivational. I mean, we're all out in the world driving around, helping our customers, doing stuff. We understand that the weather's changing, but when it gets that intense rainfall, intense heat, that's when people really are going to start paying attention. And I think it's in our best interest to be prepared with a technology solution to help our customers be successful.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And then I also want to just remind everybody that you personally will do a free water analysis for them on their property if they have a question. If they want an analysis done, we'll send out a copy of this video to everybody who's watching today or signed up. We'll put your contact information in there so they can contact you, and that's okay.
Let's do that. Yeah, absolutely. If nothing else, folks will get exposure. It's like, oh, I didn't know that you could do that. I didn't know that you could measure inches of water that's required. I didn't know that you could measure inches of water that is necessary to keep healthy plants. I didn't know you could do that, like remotely without a controller on the site. Yeah. Yes, we can help with that. It's actually really kind of fun. So I look forward to supporting some folks.
Yeah, Greg, I did this for one of my neighboring HOAs, 60-acre HOA. They were applying 3 times the amount of water that was required. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars on 60 acres. It's shocking what you see out there. This is one I just recently did, and so we're making a change. But and thanks. I know you're part of that analysis, so this is good news.
It's and the reason why that happens, all over the place, is that the customer has already budgeted the money. Yeah. For them, it's a fixed cost. It's sunk. They're like, I want to think about other stuff. I want to think about solar or, redoing the parking or whatever. It's going to be the confident and motivated contractor who's going to come up and say, wait a minute, how much are you spending? If we do this, we don't have to spend that.
Right. And Greg, I mean, you hit on a really good point there, right? Special assessments kill HOAs. When you go to resell your place, everybody wants to know 2 questions. What's the HOA monthly fee? And when was the last special assessment? And if the first one's high and the most recent special assessment was recent for $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, it kills the values. So if you can save money and water and spend that money on other things, property values go up like crazy.
It's true. Those are some of the fundamental things that drive a business practice at an HOA.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's the next webinar. That's for a different time, but that's a good one. So, well, Greg, you've been great helping us understand with the weather changing, and I don't mean summer to fall, but with the weather changing in a big way, how much more valuable smart controllers, Jain Unity software is going to be for future water management and really, to keep the planet sustainable. So thank you very much. You did a great job. I really enjoyed it. Thank you to all of you who tuned in today and watched. We really appreciate. We know how busy everybody is these days, and I really appreciate that you spent a little bit of your time and your day with us learning about water management. So, and remember, you can always watch any of our over 200 trainings now on the Jains USA website, jainsusa.com/trainings, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. So, Greg, have a great weekend. Thanks again. Thanks, everybody. I hope you guys all have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.